What's up, everyone? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cassie, and yes, I have the witch hat on, which means it is time for Metaphysics and Mascara, which is a kind of series I'm doing where I do my makeup and we talk about metaphysics, paranormal, all that fun stuff, folklore, things like that. Today we're going to be talking about the Sallie house, which if you don't know anything about it, you should stick around and find out. If you like this video, leave a like, subscribe. If you dislike it, go ahead and dislike it, but leave a comment either way because I love to hear what you have to say, and let's get started. So, alright, the Sally's house, right, or Sallie house, is a house in Hutchinson, Kansas, so not actually that far away from my own place. And, it's really an interesting one because it's not a mansion like the last one we covered. It's not a battleground. It's nothing like that. It's just a normal, regular family house built, I believe, in the mid, like, 1800s. So it's kind of an older one, admittedly. But we don't really have any history on it, which is the interesting thing, I think, because it's considered one of the most, if not the most, paranormal house in America, but we have no real history on it, like, at all, which is just okay. What we do know is that a family called the Finleys, I believe, lived there originally. I don't know if they built it or if they just moved in there, but I think they built it. Don't quote me on that. But they're the, like, original owners. Dr. Finley, Dr. George Finley was, like, the main character of the legends, basically. We don't know much about his family. We don't care. Throw them out the window. They're irrelevant to the legends, really. That's all we know. That's all we know for sure. What legends tell us is that there was a girl named Sallie who died. It's always from appendicitis, which is interesting to me, I think. But depending on which version of the legends we're going with, it's either that she was rushed there by her mother as an emergency, and Dr. Finley was like, oh my god, it's appendicitis, we need to operate right away. Because obviously back then it was a much bigger, I mean, it's still a big deal, but it was a much bigger deal then. And he started operating on her in the house before anesthetic had fully taken effect, and she ended up dying. There's not, according to legend, it doesn't really say whether she died because of the, like, shock of the pain, or because her appendicitis actually ruptured and it was just too late. It doesn't actually say that, but it's kind of implied that it's because he started operating before anesthetics kicked in. Another legend is that Sallie was his illegitimate daughter, come out of an affair with an African housemaid, which we don't have proof of either way. No, there's nothing that says anything about an African housemaid. There's also nothing that says that a Sallie lived there, died there, anything like that. This is all urban legend. We just know that Dr. Pickman, or not Dr. Pickman, that comes later, Dr. Finley did live there. So, interesting. You wouldn't think that that would be a build-up for one of the most paranormal houses in the country, but it apparently is. So, supposedly there were reports of paranormal before our main cast, the Pickman family, comes in. I haven't found anything on that. It's supposed reports. If they were, they're not really, like, anything official. I couldn't find them. There's no documentaries on them or anything like that. What really got the ball rolling on the whole Sallie house haunting was the Pickman family, which they moved in. It was a couple, and the woman was pregnant with their son, I believe, and they moved in 1992, early 1990s, after getting married, like recently getting married or whatever. And that's where this gets interesting. So according to them, like, paranormal activity started immediately, right? It wasn't anything crazy. It was things like lights flickering, items just kind of being displaced. You know, if you follow paranormal stuff, that's all basic stuff that happens in, like, when you first move into a haunted house, right? Because the activity usually starts low and then kind of builds up. And that's kind of what they reported. So, cool. Activities low, probably enough that they probably didn't think anything of it. Just was like, oh, that's odd. You know, lights flickering, toys activating, things like that. It's that stuff that you can kind of, like, weird, but, you know, whatever. No big deal. It picked up, according to them, after their son was born. I don't have their son's name, and honestly, we keep minors out of this stuff, so even if I did, I wouldn't say. But so after their son was born, that's when the activity picked up, and it got so much worse according to them. So it went from things like, okay, the lights are like lightly flickering occasionally, to, you know, the lights in the child's room was staying on all night even after they turned it off. You know, the neighbors would tell them, hey, like, you left the nursery light on last night and stuff like that, and they were like, we turned that off. You know, so things like that where it's like, okay, well, that's harder to explain. Why did the light turn on after you turned them off? You know, things like that. It just kept escalating. The child would be kept awake, and it seemed to really target the father, the man. It seemed to really hate him for some reason. Really targeted him. Deborah Pickman, the wife, didn't really seem to have too many issues from what I heard, just the normal stuff, or from what I've seen, but it really went after, the man, which I can't remember what his name is, I'm sorry. Tony. And, yeah, so kind of picked up there. So they had stuff like mold growing and stuff, and some of it is stuff that you can kind of explain away, like mold. It's an old house, right? It's weird that it's growing kind of rapidly, like they were saying, but whatever. Lights flickering again, old house. Who knows about the wiring situation? With lights turning on and off and stuff like that is kind of weird. At one point though, like right before they ended up getting a psychic medium to help, they came home and found like a bunch of the children's toys like sitting in a circle, like the stuffed animals, like sitting in a circle in the room, which I'm not sure how you would explain that one away, right? That's a little weird. So after that, they were understandably freaked the fuck out, which I would be too, you know. I'd be a little, like, hey, there's, like, living stuffed animals in my house. Could we maybe figure out what's going on with that? And so they got a psychic medium. Well, actually, no. So they come home one day and they see these stuffed animals in this circle, and they're like, what? That's fucking weird. We're gonna leave for a bit because that's, like, distressing, right? Like, living stuffed animals moving around your house. So they start to leave, and Tony Pickman, he feels like a burning pain across his back. Turns out he was scratched 3 times. Which, if you're big in numerology, so he can be significant. If you're not, he got scratched. Anyway. So they're like, whoa, okay now, we're gonna try and figure out what's going on with this. And they hired a psychic medium, I don't remember what her name was. Barbara Connors, whatever. That's the medium that they had come into their house. Which okay, so full disclosure, like, I do believe in the paranormal. That's part of the reason I really enjoy this kind of stuff. I tend to have, like, a trust but verify idea as far as paranormal stuff. I really enjoy it. I do believe it exists, but I do also think that people tend to exaggerate. I do believe in psychics. I believe in pretty much the whole shebang. I just also believe that people tend to exaggerate, right? So a lot of psychics out there, they may be psychic, but they aren't always accurate, you know? And I'm not necessarily trying to dog on psychics for that. And I'm not trying to say that all psychics are not accurate. What I am saying is that there is a lot of evidence for psychics being fairly, like, accurate, but off a bit. Like, they miss something. Or it's not an accurate thing, right? So, I'm not trying to say this person was a bad psychic or whatever. I am saying that there's a lot of cases of psychics coming in and either making a situation worse because they haven't done their due diligence, they haven't questioned their own input or whatever, or there's just that little bit of an overlay of, like, you pick something up, like, oh, hey, there's a little girl, and then your mind, like, fills stuff in. Like, they may have very well picked up that there's a little girl, but then they kind of filled in this other part of it with their own mind. Also, anyway, getting off the psychic thing. Sorry, a little bit of a rant. But, so she comes in, and she tells them that there's a little girl named Sallie. And yeah, this is where the whole Sallie's house gets coined, because there's no evidence of a Sallie before that. None. We don't have a Sallie. No, nothing popped up anywhere about a Sallie. So this is where the legend begins, really. She comes in, she tells them, hey, yeah, you have a ghost. and her name is Sallie, and you should treat her kind of like a part of the family because she's trying to get your attention, which is why she's acting up like this. So, first of all, another little rant of mine. Don't do that. I am not necessarily trying to say that every ghost is negative, but once you start welcoming a ghost in, it is that much harder to get them out, according to pretty much everyone. Pretty much all paranormal lore. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Some people get haunted by, like, family members or whatever, and they don't want them to go, and I'm not saying, like, be rude about it. I'm saying, like, based on the account of one person after you know that you've had some incidences that are a little scary, and one person comes in and says, hey, it's fine, just welcome her, it's okay, I would not do that. So, little poor advice there, I feel like. Again, this kind of goes into where a psychic can be a little arrogant, you know, thinking that they have all the answers. By the way, I use the Busy, and now I'm using the Akua, because I'll forget. Anyway, so yeah, okay. So they try. The Pikmins, they actually do kind of try and welcome her in. They try and kind of treat her like just part of the family, like another like weird invisible daughter. The activity just gets worse. The attacks get worse. Tony gets more scratches, like repeatedly. Allegedly, like a doll catches fire. Candles start catching fire, like they're just burning out of nowhere. And so after like I think 2 years of this, they move. They're done. They're out. They leave the whole house. And I believe they're still in the city. Don't quote me on that. Don't like try and hunt them down. But I believe they actually didn't leave the city. Like they're still in Athens. They just left the house. So it's interesting though because like it became this big deal. Like it's one of those weird things of like it became this huge deal on this little tiny house. There's really no history. It really was the accounting of like one family that made it be this big, huge deal, right? Having a bit of an eyeliner day. So anyway, so they leave. The house remains vacant for ever, I think, quite a while until it gets bought by somebody. We don't really know for sure. There's some hints on that, but most people are more worried about the Pikmins and less about like who actually owns the house now. But the interesting thing, I think, about the Sallie house is that there's not much history. There's only the like one family that had these reports, but it is in everything. Yeah, so it's been on like Ghost Adventures. I think the Try Guys went out there and did something. The series The Haunting, Most Haunted Towns did something. Like Ghost Stories, all of that. Like it's been on so many different things. Deborah Pickman actually wrote like a whole like autobiography thing about the experiences there. You can find it on like Amazon and stuff. I've actually read that book, and it's an interesting book. It's been a little while, but I have read it. So, like, the hype of it is actually bigger than the history of it, which does happen pretty frequently, actually. But it's interesting, I think, because, like, there's not, you know, a lot of haunted places we have a lot of history of, like, Gettysburg and, like, some of the insane asylums that are really haunted, the prisons, things like that you kind of see. Those are very, very historical, and you can really see why it might be haunted. This one, it's like, we don't have much of it. But it's in everything. Like, if you follow the paranormal, you know you've heard about the Sallie's house. 100%. You've heard about the Sallie's house. So, what happened there? There's also, like, a lot of, like, kind of hearsay rumors things, like, that they found satanic symbols in the basement, and they found, like, blood stains in the attic, and the stuff. So, like, none of that is proven, as far as we're aware. It's mostly, again, just kind of hearsay, legend kind of things. So, who knows? Who knows what really happened there? We've got a lot of these, like, legends and hearsay and stuff like that. But the thing is, because a lot of people who are skeptical say, oh, well, there was never, like, a Sallie that lived there. There was never a Sallie that died there. That we don't have records of that. And it's like, cool. The problem with that is in the 1800s, we don't have records of a lot of things. Okay, records were all paper. Paper was easily destroyed, and also like back then, I don't think people realize that back then, like records were almost more of a suggestion. Like we have a lot of incidences where you look at something and like you'll have a census of a house, and like one year there'll be 5 people in it, and then like 3 or 4 years later there'll suddenly be like 6 people in it, but you don't have a birth record there. Or vice versa, you'll have 4 people, but you don't have a death record. It was pretty common back then when everyone had land and there wasn't as much oversight and there wasn't the internet and everything else, that people would just, they'd have in-home births, they didn't fill out birth certificates, they didn't have DNA tests of who knows who the actual parents were. People would die and they'd have like funerals in the actual home, they'd bury them nearby. Like there's a lot of that. And I'm not saying necessarily that this is what's happening here, but there's a lot of that kind of stuff across the country. You find that a lot. So saying that there's no record of a Sallie that lived there or lived anywhere nearby doesn't necessarily mean anything. A lot of times, especially if it was like a miscarriage or like a stillbirth or just died very soon after birth, it would never get on a census. There really wouldn't be a record. That happened very frequently. Sometimes there would be, sometimes there wouldn't. So I'm not necessarily saying that there can't be a Sallie haunting there because there was never a Sallie that lived there. You never know. Also, if there was a Sallie that did live nearby, it could have, who knows? We don't know. But it's interesting because there's so many experiences. All of these paranormal investigators have had experiences, people who visit it because it's open for tours and it's open for overnight stays as well. It's like 50-50. Some people are like, nah, it's a hoax, we didn't have anything happen, and then there's other people who are like, yeah, it's haunted, we had a lot happen. And it's a lot of times men that seem to get targeted. So cool. We have this most haunted house in America with almost no history, but a lot of legends. And we don't know what's happening there. So, interesting thing, if you're in Kansas, swing by, visit it, tell me what you think. I'm curious about it. If you've had any experiences there, let me know what they were, what you think. Do you think that the Sallie's house is haunted? Who knows? I think there's a lot of evidence that say it is haunted, but there is zero evidence to tell us why. So, cool thing, maybe. Could be a hoax, could be a lot of people just having, exaggerating or playing up the hype or whatever, but I think the fact that there's so many people who have said that they've had experiences, it is interesting. Did the Pikmins? I don't know. Anyway, that's it for this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!